Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us at this session and taking some time out of this awesome conference. So my name is Randy Dyer. I've been with L.L.Bean for 35 years, and during that time, I've really been privileged to have worked on our front-end systems in the architecture and design of those systems, including L.L.Bean.com and our call center systems.
Hi there, I'm Chris Cummings. I have been working in the retail industry for many years and in online retail direct-to-consumer commerce for the last couple decades. About 5 years ago, I started a company named Fearless Technology Group. We're a consulting firm focused on helping customers modernize their technology architectures. And we've been working with L.L.Bean since the start of the modernization journey that we're going to share with you here today. I just want to say thank you for coming out here to hear us. We're the last session of the day. I know we're between you and happy hour. I know those seats are really comfortable. So hopefully you guys will be somewhat interesting and keep you awake here. But thank you.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about our modernization journey. We're going to talk some about the evolution of L.L.Bean, just so you can kind of see where we're coming from here. We're going to talk about our case for change, and then our vision for the future. And then we're going to talk about how we're actually realizing that vision. We'll talk about some of the lessons we've learned along the way, and then we'll talk a little bit about the journey forward from here. So if you don't know L.L.Bean, L.L.Bean is a company that sells apparel and equipment for, well, either casual wear or outdoors. You might have seen our boots or have a pair of our boots. And our catalogs have been around in the mail for a long time. L.L.Bean is a family-owned company. It's been in business since 1912, where we started out as a catalog company. L.L.Bean is passionate about getting people into the outdoors, and our brand strategy is really about providing products and experiences that are made for the shared joy of the outdoors. Recently, we just launched our Be an Outsider campaign. You might have seen that. And that's really about targeting, getting families outside. And family is whatever you consider your family. It might be your kids, your pets, or whatever. And then also we've extended that, you may have seen a little bit of that into the workplace with our Be an Outsider at Work, where we partnered with Industrious to deliver some outside workspaces in around different cities. So, like I mentioned, L.L.Bean started out as a catalog company back in 1912, and catalog is what really drove our business for the first part of the 20th century. In 1996, we launched our e-commerce website. It was pretty early on in that era. And today, our e-commerce website actually accounts for more than 2/3 of our revenue. Other than the catalog, up until the early 2000s, we really had just one retail store located in Freeport, Maine, where the company headquarters are. And in early 2000s or so, we started to expand our retail presence a bit. And today, we've got over 50 stores around the country, and kiosks and some other mobile stores as well. Part of the, as we kind of went through the change on how we were delivering capabilities to our customers and doing business, each channel sort of kind of grew up on its own. So we had systems to really support that direct marketing and catalog and phone order entries and those kinds of things. When we launched the website, we had a website that had a lot of this capabilities for taking orders over the web, and then store sales. Part of the issue is that as time's gone on and customers have started experiencing us across these different channels, their interactions are changing as well. They want to do things with and interact with L.L.Bean in all of those different channels, and they want to do it seamlessly. And part of the problem is that our systems had really kind of reached a point where they just couldn't support those evolving customer needs.
Okay, we're going to get to the what we did here soon, but one thing first is just to highlight that this is not a unique to L.L.Bean trend. It's not even a unique to retail trend. Their customers across all kinds of verticals are changing their behavior. They have different expectations of brands, and there's all kinds of metrics out there in the industry to reference that. We pulled 3 of them up here to share. First one, Harvard Business Review says 73% of consumers now use multiple channels when making a purchase from a brand. And 87% of the customers surveyed think that brands need to invest more in making those experiences across channels more consistent. So they're clearly saying something to the brands these days that they're not happy. The experiences are not consistent. They want the same company no matter whether they're interacting with them on a web channel, on their phone, in the store. And they don't want to start a transaction in one channel and then start from scratch in another. So expectations have been raised for the brands. Investment is required, but the good news is that there is ROI available. Last metric is 30% higher lifetime value for customers interacting through multiple channels versus those who only engage through a single channel. And though the bar has been raised, the brands are stepping up. They need to step up and meet this challenge. And frankly, the way we've all been building systems for the last 2 decades is no longer good enough to meet that challenge. Something clearly has to change.
So about 3 years ago, we were approached and asked if we could look at how we can simplify the interactions with our customers. So one of the things that we did is just took a step back and looked at all of those different interactions, and saw that things like a customer might come into a store with an item that they purchased online and they want to return it, and they want to replace it with another item that maybe doesn't exist in the store, so that order is going to then be placed in the store and shipped from the online channel, as an example. So in looking at all of those different interactions, we started to then step back and say, what are the inhibitors? What's kind of keeping us from delivering those cleaner customer experiences? As I mentioned earlier, our systems were a core part of some of those barriers. Not that they didn't have great capabilities, because in their own channels and in their own right, they do. But they just weren't designed to work with each other for these new kind of interactions. So we stepped back and looked at our application architecture to really understand what was going on. And some of the things that we found are somewhat obvious. The applications were siloed. But what that means is it made it difficult for us to provide sort of a common customer experience there. Those applications were monolithic. Some of them are getting long in the tooth. Some of them have been in place for 20 years or so. They were implemented back in the days when we did monolithic systems and tightly coupled and all of that kind of thing. So ultimately, that just makes those applications costly and challenging to change. A small change in one of these applications requires that we go through and do all kinds of regression testing to make sure that we haven't broken things unintentionally, and that's manually intensive. All of these applications are delivered through on-premise infrastructure, and not that that's a bad thing, but in some ways it's limiting. We don't have a lot of flexibility or ability to deliver new infrastructure and capabilities rapidly. And then, with a seasonal business like ours, as you might imagine, during the holidays we get really busy. A lot of the rest of the year we're much less busy, but we have to plan for that capacity all year long. So we took a step back and tried to come up with or understand what we needed to change in order to solve some of these issues. We came up with what we described, what we called our omnichannel architecture. And this architecture really was designed to meet the goals of supporting these consistent customer experiences. We also needed it to improve our agility and our speed to market, getting new capabilities out there. And we needed it to be built on a modern architecture. I've been around this merry-go-round enough times that this would probably be about the third time that we've reimagined and re-envisioned these applications to serve our customers. And so we're just sort of planning for that next cycle to see, to make sure it can live that life cycle. So the vision that we created, this is what we found that we needed to do is we had sort of envisioned a lot of different capabilities around microservices and cloud platforms and all of this kind of thing. But when you want to sell that to an executive, you got to simplify it. And so what we did is created sort of this one-page vision document that described what it is that we wanted to do. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details on this, but the idea here was that this isn't sort of the system design. This is really a tool just for communicating with those executives. And what we found is that having something like this was really important, because every time we went into a meeting with those executives, they're busy, they got a lot on their minds, and we had to kind of refresh them on, what it is we're talking about, why are we talking about it, that kind of thing. And so having something like this was really valuable for doing that. It was also eye-opening in that, obviously, executives sort of know what we do as a business, but when you start to put all of the pieces kind of in front of them, then it starts to open their eyes up a little bit about just, all of the complexity that's there. When you do something like this, one of the things you want to do is use a little bit of artistic license. And so, for example, just as you look at the picture, you can see that the systems on the bottom, the enterprise applications, don't really compare and scale to what's on the top. Those are obviously large, important, critical applications, but they're not the focus of what we're targeting. So, they're just kind of a little less in scale there. So anyway, the point of this is create a vision, make it simple, put it on one page. What we found after doing this as well is that other teams started using this document in their presentations and in their selling of what they wanted to do, so that they could sort of latch on to the success that we were having here with our momentum. So I just kind of boiled down that document a little bit so that we could talk a little bit more about how Google Cloud fits into all of this. So at the top of the diagram, we have our customer interaction applications. And that could be our point of sale system, or our customer-facing website, our mobile web, custom store applications, contact center, et cetera. All of those applications, or in our vision and what we're working toward, is that those applications share capabilities through shared services, which are exposed as APIs. And those shared services could either be custom built, they could be purchased, or they could be legacy, like in the case of our commerce system. To date, we've actually been working on several parts of this. We have several pieces in production today. So as an example, our customer-facing website, the UI layer of our customer-facing website, many of the pages that you see, if you go to our website today, are actually delivered, with this architecture. Some core services like our purchase history, inventory availability service are delivered as custom services today. And we are in the process of implementing a promotion service that we actually purchased as we speak. All of this is tied together through an API gateway. We are using Apogee as our API gateway today. We've actually been using Apogee for probably 3+ years at this point. So we actually had a pretty good base of APIs already in Apogee. And then, so just to sort of where does Google Cloud fit into this? That customer-facing UI, like I mentioned, runs on GCP and GKE. Those custom services also run in GKE, and that purchase service will run in GKE. We've got some on-prem services that are not in GKE. They're really part of our legacy commerce application, but we are leveraging those, and we've layered an API layer on top of that.
Okay, so you've seen where we started at L.L.Bean, and you've seen where we're trying to go, how we're trying to realize this vision, what it looks like. So how did we come to use Google Cloud Platform? Let's talk about that. It's Google Conference. And we chose GCP about 1.5 years ago. We didn't really start there, though. The first thing we embraced pretty strongly on this journey to realize the vision was Kubernetes, and really, first and foremost, containers. But then as we looked for a place to operate those containers, deploy, run them, we embraced Kubernetes. And we went after the containers early because we just saw the benefits, the immutability of those environments, the ability to spin up environments rapidly during the dev cycle, scale horizontally very easily if the app's designed for it, was just very compelling. So we embraced containers, Kubernetes. That led us a bit naturally to Google Cloud Platform at that time. There was really not another game in town from the big providers. They were starting to talk about Kubernetes, and they weren't embracing it. That has changed in a big way. Everybody is scrambling to catch up, but Google still pretty much the leader here. But that wasn't the only thing. Kubernetes is a great example of Google's open source commitment, and we're benefiting from that with a number of other applications that we use, and we just really liked that open source commitment. We liked their whole approach to it. We didn't see quite the same stance with the other providers. Security architecture. There were some things about Google's security architecture that we thought were very appropriate for a cloud native environment. That zero trust approach was different than traditional on-premise approaches that were being used at the time we encountered it. But we could see the power, we embraced it, and we've kind of blended what Google brings to the table there, along with some security capabilities that are there with containerized apps. There's some things you can do that are kind of new and unique in some ways. And then we've blended a few on-premise measures into the mix for a pretty healthy blend on the security front. A few other things to hit quickly here. Dynamic scale. Randy mentioned the seasonality. That's a big win for a retailer. Not surprising. Cloud native brings the ability to position teams to innovate. A lot of that's by the speed at which they can move to market, the speed at which they can try new technologies. We really felt like we had the tools necessary with Google in that area. And then finally, being a retailer with digital marketing, there's a key business relationship with L.L.Bean and Google that we felt was an advantage. And with cloud native in general, with some things with Google in particular, we liked the pricing model. So what does our deployment look like on GCP? Well, I'm going to go yet more simple here and just highlight 3 major components that make up the core of what we are doing. Google Cloud Native, GCP, GKE is obviously a key part of that, but over the top of that, we've laid a microservices architecture down. And we really embraced microservices earliest in the game here, and we We really embraced the principles behind microservices, the domain-driven design concepts that are there, the separation of concerns, the loosely coupled applications, bounded contexts, language having meaning with within those contexts. And we also embraced the idea that teams could align with application domains, business domains. And when you mix all that into a microservices environment deployed the right way, it really allows you to move all the pieces forward at their own pace, really changed the game for L.L.Bean. At the time, microservices weren't as widely adopted outside of the big internet companies. It's become much more industry standard now and much more accepted. Also here, DevOps pipeline is a key part of the puzzle, continuous integration and delivery. That's how everything gets built, tested, stress tested, vulnerability scanned, deployed, monitored, maintained, all of that. There's a strong pipeline here that is a key part of everything that goes out onto the platform and a key part of what we consider our platform. So this looks really simple. Is it really that simple? No, it's really not that simple. There's actually a lot more going on than that simple picture shows. There is a healthy mix of things that Google provides as a service, but there's also a bunch of stuff that we've brought to the table. And really the point of this slide is not to talk about each one of these things, but to highlight that the cloud native approach we chose allows us a lot of flexibility to mix the bits and pieces together that we feel are right for a given job. And for examples are GCP, the backbone, GCP itself, Compute Engine, Kubernetes Engine, things like PubSub for event messaging, Cloud Spanner as a service, relational database that we use for inventory availability and some other things. All great stuff we get as managed services. But on the stuff we've rolled, we have key dev components, dev pipeline stuff, GitHub, Jenkins, CI, Nexus Artifact Repository. We use Terraform for infrastructure automation. And then just as an example, MongoDB, we chose to go with Mongo for some reasons that were very specific to our use case, but we were able to deploy that as a service for our dev teams. So from a dev team standpoint, they need a relational DB. They've got an option with Spanner and with other things. But with a document store DB, they've got an option with Mongo. And they don't have to go build that themselves. They can use it. So powerful mix going with cloud native and putting the pieces out there to enable the dev teams. But how do we do all that at L.L.Bean? Well, one of the things that we did early in the process is we established what we call a platform services team. And this team has a mission. The mission is to maintain the systems and processes necessary for agile and continuous software delivery, and furthermore, to enable the dev teams to embrace DevOps culture and practice. So these guys aren't the development team. These guys are the platform team who maintains the platform, stewards it forward, takes care of security concerns, manages and maintains that DevOps pipeline, and a myriad of other things. They collaborate heavily with the dev teams. Our dev teams build software applications using all this, and they deploy them. Just a few practice areas to highlight and their mantra, and if those of you who have read the continuous delivery book and the DevOps handbook, you see some things that probably look familiar here. But automate everything. If you're doing microservices at scale, if you're going cloud native, you can't really have manual steps in all this. If you're going to be efficient, it just doesn't work. But they do things like infrastructure, automation, scripting this stuff to create the systems and configs that are necessary, letting teams spin up environments really quickly and easily. Everything to do with continuous delivery is in their domain. And then site reliability engineering. We want to push out fast. We also want to be stable, get immediate feedback, react to that, and make sure we've got healthy systems go forward. So big lesson learned. We'll share a few more lessons learned here in a few slides, but strongly recommend you consider, if you've got some magnitude in your environment, a platform services team to help you forward.
Great. So before I move on, one thing I wanted to add to what Chris was just saying is on that list, which I won't flip back to, but on that list, you might have saw Cloud Spanner on there, for example. And Cloud Spanner in some ways might be a bit overkill for what we're using it for today. We've got some other use cases where it'll be more effective, but one of the things that about that is that I want my teams to be focused on the customer and delivering customer value. I don't want my teams to have to become technology experts and learn how to do things like stand-up database environments that are highly available and all of that kind of stuff. There are technology providers that can do that much better than we can and much more efficiently than we can, and that's why we want to leverage that kind of thing. So just wanted to call that out. One of the things I'm going to talk about is one of the examples applications that we've delivered, and I've already mentioned it. That's the L.L.Bean.com website, or at least the UI layer of that L.L.Bean.com website. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I'm going to talk a little bit about how how this platform has really given us some capabilities that we didn't have before there. So in order to really explain this, I got to talk a little bit about the, how our legacy website was built and architected. We first implemented it back in 1996, like I mentioned. It underwent a big technology change in about 2001 when we switched it over to the Webs for Commerce platform, and all based on Java and JEE and all of those kinds of technologies. The UI layer at the time was really part of that monolith implemented in JSPs. And as time goes by, the site became more dynamic. We started layering on lots of JavaScript to make everything dynamic and robust. And then as new devices started to become prominent, then we added more JavaScript to handle those kinds of things. So anyway, it got to the point where that UI application was just very complex and fragile and difficult to maintain and all of that. So that was another thing. So we said, we got to step back and figure out a better way to do this. So we came up with what we called just simply the front-end architecture. And what front-end architecture is a framework that we put together based primarily on React and other open source libraries, all based in Node.js. And this architecture allows us to deliver customer-facing applications that will run on either desktop, mobile, or tablets. Any form factors there. And like I mentioned, we are using it to replace that UI layer on L.L.Bean.com today, and we have plans to use it for other capabilities as well, like in our call centers. Not only is it using React, but the architecture also defines how we use React. So it employs an atomic design model that really mandates that all the components are loosely coupled and independently developable and deployable. And obviously it supports responsive web design and accessibility requirements out of the box. And we've found that since we've implemented, it's actually been a pretty good improvement in performance and gives us some scalability and speed to market with this. And it just is a platform that gives us the ability to support ongoing experience optimization. So I mentioned that we have gone to production with many of the pages on our website under this architecture. And that deployment obviously is on Google Cloud Platform or in Google Kubernetes Engine. So what the value of the platform brought to all of this, though, is that other than the scaling and things I mentioned, is that So a little case study here. A few weeks ago, we implemented a new version of this application that included capability around the category pages. And shortly after we were deployed, we started getting some alerts from the monitoring that we had set up. And those alerts were telling us that Kubernetes was doing lots of pod restarts. And so when we looked into it, it was doing the pod restarts because we had seen that the memory memory usage had started climbing pretty rapidly. And Kubernetes, we had set it up with some thresholds that says when you get to a certain point of memory usage, restart yourself so that everything stays clean and running. And so that's what it was doing. And so because it was doing that, customers never saw that we were having an issue, and never had any downtime or anything like that. I point this out because if this were our legacy website that doesn't have these capabilities, it doesn't have something like Kubernetes doing this kind of management, then it probably would have keeled over and twitched its feet for a while. But that didn't happen in this case. The other part about this, like Chris mentioned, we've got the CI/CD pipeline in place that allows us to do rapid deployments and frequent deployments. So as part of the problem resolution to all of this, we were able to get in, analyze what was going on, make changes, and get it into production quickly. Turned out that the problem was actually a little deeper than what we thought. The first implementation didn't solve the problem. But because, again, the rapid ability to turn things around, we were able to get the issue solved in about 4 hours. On our legacy site, that probably would have been at least a day and an overnight in order to solve something like that. And likely, very likely, would have been an outage to the website. So that's just an example of some of the capability and advantages that we've seen on the platform so far.
Okay, so I mentioned some learnings we were going to share, and we picked 5 things to raise up and highlight here. In reality, we are practicing Agile here, so we are doing iterations, retros, continuously learning and trying to improve. But when you step back and you look at the big picture of what we were doing, these stood out, and we thought they would be worth sharing with you. A couple of them you've already heard something about. Number 1, establish that vision for the future. You saw what the one for L.L.Bean looked like. Yours will look different, but it's really important that you do that up front, and you do it in a way that everyone in the organization who needs to can embrace it. So the IT on the ground folks, the developers have to be able to understand it. The IT management has to get on board, but those executives have to understand at the right level what this is that we're trying to do. And the reason that's important is because this is not a project, this is a journey. So if you have an organization of any magnitude that you're trying to do this in, it's going to be a multi-year commitment. And that multi-year commitment is going to have executive sponsorship. It's going to have budget. There's no way you can get there without selling that this is a journey worth taking, and that vision is critical to do that. It's okay to start with prototype projects and such at the outset. We did that, but really you can't think about it as a project. Don't do that, but do iterate. You can do this by iterating, by bringing business value along the way, by learning and changing course as you go. But it's going to take time. Third one, embrace DevOps is what we summed it up as, but what it really means is to get the ROI out of a big modernization effort, you have to recognize it's more than just the technology. It's the people and the process. You won't get the benefit if you keep trying to build software the way you've always built it. If you're not willing to reorganize where appropriate, to align teams with product domains, allow them some independence in evolving those and deploying them, let them fail fast and recover. It's a different way of thinking for a lot of companies. And it's frankly way harder than the technology here. It's we kind of challenged pretty much everything that L.L.Bean was doing with software development when we went after this, but it's worth doing. Fourth thing I've already talked about: establish a platform services team, especially if you're going cloud native, especially if you have more than a few development teams. It will pay off. And then finally, engage security at the outset. We hear this all the time, right? People are always telling us get security on board up front. We did this, and in hindsight, if we had waited 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road and then tried to retrofit security in, it would not have been a good outcome. It would have been very costly and painful. It would have disrupted development tracks, and it's pretty likely it would not have been as good an outcome as we have now. But we did this up front, and the way we did that, twofold. One, we established an executive sponsorship team, a steering committee, if you will, at L.L.Bean, key business execs who had a stake in what we were doing and the right IT management resources. The head of security was on that committee, and so he was there at the outset as we started talking about going to the cloud, going cloud native. When we established the platform team, we added a security architect to that team, so that individual was there right up front, and it's paid off. We really had no idea where the security path was going to lead when we started, and we found our way through, and we continue to evolve, but we found it to a good place. So just a few lessons. There are probably hundreds or thousands of micro lessons you come across as you do something like this. 5 that we thought were worth mentioning to you.
Great. So where are we going from here? So we mentioned we actually started this effort a couple of years ago. At the time, GKE was pretty early in the market, and I don't remember exactly which version we started on, maybe 1.4, something like that. So we had to do a lot of work to secure things, get things interconnected the way they needed to be with what we had at the time. Obviously, since then, things like Istio are coming on board that can solve a lot of the problems that we had to kind of work around at the time. So part of this journey is to continually evolve that platform as new capabilities come in, as things change, and to continue to build out that layer of services that you saw earlier. So we've got active development underway right now with some new capabilities that we'll be rolling out probably at this, we'll actually complete development before our peak season, but we actually won't roll them out until after, just because, but we don't want to do that. And then the other thing that we are doing is many of the legacy systems that we're replacing at this point, like I mentioned, are fairly old. Some of them are very batch oriented. And so as we're going through this re-architecting, we're really looking at these from more of an event-based approach. And so part of the work that we're doing is starting to layer some event processing capabilities onto the platform. And then the other thing that we've got going on is, as a direct marketer, as you might expect, we've got a lot of data about our customers and how they interact with us, and we use that data to model and for delivering catalogs and emails and all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of analysis that we do, and up until this point, we've done that really with your traditional enterprise data warehouse capabilities and tools like SAS and some of these other things. But again, as things like the targeted ads and all of that kind of thing just have created more and more data that we need to process, and so we're just running out of our current infrastructure, just running out of steam with doing that. So we've got some work underway where we are pulling a lot of that data into the Google Cloud Platform and using tools like BigQuery and Cloud, Dataflow. with all these tools, I can't keep track of all of them, but, so that work is underway. And like Chris mentioned, this is that we've got a roadmap for all of this work that we've created, and we expect to be continuing on this roadmap for at least the next few years as we bring all of this together. So we hope we've given you some information and some insights into our journey, and hopefully they can help you. So thank you. And so before we leave, I just want to invite all of you to also become an outsider, enjoy the outdoors, and you can find us at those at L.L.Bean.com up there. So we are here for questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, we're also here at the conference. If you want to, if anybody's interested in chatting in more detail, we're certainly willing to do that. So thank you.
I guess if anybody has a question, I don't actually see a microphone, so you can just shout it. We're pretty close. Oh, I see it. There it is up there.
Hey guys, thanks very much for the presentation. Could I just ask you maybe a little left field question? Did you ever consider before starting this journey to use something commercial, off the shelf, Commerce Cloud, Hybris, something like this before you went down this journey of creating the developments?
Yeah, in fact, our current website is on a commercial product, so to speak. It's on Webster Commerce. So we absolutely did consider that. One of the things that we, in our current implementation, our website is relatively rich in capabilities, and we wanted to keep that. In our current implementation, we had to do a lot of customization in order to get there, and that was just kind of a model that we didn't really want to go down at this point. At this point in time, the other thing is again, we've got a pretty big presence still in the call centers, so we get a lot of orders, coming in over the phone, and so we really wanted to be able to blend those channels together, and that was something that we just didn't see really happening well in sort of those products that are really targeted either for digital commerce or whatever.
I would add one thing to that, and that is just L.L.Bean is a pretty sophisticated digital marketer in a lot of ways, and I think there was a desire to have some best-of-breed capabilities in a number of different areas versus kind of get inside someone's platform and just live within there. And I don't know, I've seen those in multiple places. Sometimes they've worked well. A lot of times the dream doesn't come together by getting this all from one vendor, but that was at play as well.
Hi, hope you understand. My voice is a little bit bad. Thank you very much for the things you explained. You did a really big change in your company. Who was initializing this? Was it a technical part or was it done by management?
Who was our sponsor?
So I would say it was both. See the original thoughts around our changing customer base and those kind of things, and oh, by the way, we're not really servicing them very well, is something that our leadership had recognized a while ago, and so that's kind of how it started. From there, we kind of took it and said, all right, well, what are those? What's sort of the things that are holding us back there, and what do we need to do? So that's kind of when it kind of became that blend of more, business and technology kinds of things. Our sponsor really was, when we started this off, was the Senior Vice President of Marketing. And he was kind of our initial support. From there, though, we quickly were able to get the support of the CIO and the Chief Marketing Officer and you know, all of really the C-suite there, so.
And it was that one pager. I mean, honestly, it was that one page that kind of brought everybody together. It was probably kind of mind-boggling to me that did what it did, but it was worth about 1 billion words in this case. Nothing else? Happy hour? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.